Hi there everyone, let's study the spinothalamic tract, also known as anterolateral system. So the STT has two parts: anterior spinothalamic tract, which is responsible for carrying crude touch and pressure, and lateral spinothalamic tract, which is responsible for pain and temperature sensation. As the name suggests, this tract begins in the spinal cord and reaches to the thalamus in the brain. So this starts with the skin receptors, which depict the nociceptive stimuli in your limbs. These reaches to the dorsal root ganglion, which are pseudo-unipolar neurons, and they will enter into the spinal cord in the dorsal horn through the dorsal entry route. The information from the dorsal horn will travel ipsilaterally 1 to 2 segments up and then cross over to the opposite side of the spinal cord, entering the ventral horn. Let's get back to the dorsal horn. And so where the DRG is entering into the dorsal horn, this is known as Lezour's tract, the tract via which the dorsal root ganglion enters. This is the cut section of the spinal cord. The gray matter of the spinal cord have different layers called the laminae. The neurons carrying pain and temperature sensation will reach to the first and the second layer, which are known as substantia gelatinosa and nucleus proprius respectively. The neurons from dorsal root ganglion will enter into the dorsal horn and will synapse with another neurons which will travel up ipsilaterally before crossing over to the other side of the spinal cord through white commissure. These will travel all the way up to the brainstem. In the brainstem, they change their name to spinal lemniscus because various other tracts also join the spinothalamic tract. Exiting the brainstem, the neurons will further travel to the thalamus, more exactly to the ventral posterolateral nucleus of the thalamus. Here, these neurons will synapse with another neurons which will carry the information further into the cortex to the somatosensory area, which is located in the postcentral gyrus. Let's talk about the neurons. So the dorsal root ganglion serve as the first order neurons till they reaches to the substantia gelatinosa and synapse with the second order neurons which will decussate in the spinal cord, reaching all the way up to the thalamus. In the thalamus, these neurons will synapse with the third order neuron which will travel to the cortex, passing through the posterior limb of internal capsule and reaches to the designated place. Let's have a look on this image, which is the whole spinothalamic pathway from the spinal cord to the brain. So these small triangles are the thalamus. This is the midbrain, pons and medulla, your brainstem. And the second last one is the cervical spine. And the last one is the lumbar spine. The cervical carries the information from upper limb, lumbar carries the information from lower limb. So blue is the neurons traveling from lower limb and pink are the neurons traveling from upper limb. The spinal cord have somatotropic organizations for various spinal segments. For spinothalamic tract, the cervical lies the most medial, whereas the sacrum lies the most lateral, which means the medial part of the spinothalamic tract will carry the sensation from the cervical region and the lateral part of the spinothalamic tract will carry the sensation from the sacral region. This orientation is really helpful in the case of the spinal cord injuries. Let's mark the first, second and third order neurons in this diagram. So in the brain are your third order neurons from thalamus to the cortex. The second order neuron lies from the dorsal horn to the thalamus and your dorsal root ganglions are your first order neurons. I forgot to tell you that when these second order neurons are crossing over to the opposite side and reaching to the ventral horn, they will reach to the lateral spinothalamic fasciculus, as you can see here. This ends your spinothalamic tract. Hope it's helpful.